Good evening, this is Professor Bobo, and this is about Chapter 4, analyzing the analysis and the results. Now, I've talked to you about with this research project, we did not do any of our own collection of research or data collection. So we are using the information that is in our literature review as our data collection, as well as our reflection journal to help triangulate the data. So we're going to be talking about what all of that means. So in chapter 4, you're supposed to do an experiment technically, and then be able to collect data on that experiment. Since we did not have time for that in this particular course, we are using our literature review with people who have written prior information to help solve and reflect on our research questions. So we're hoping that some of the data that is collected in those journals will help us to address or make connections and answer our research question. And maybe additional research is needed in order to answer our research questions. So when reporting data, you discuss themes and categories that emerge from the words and the phrases and the sentences that you've collected from interviews, observations, and document analysis. Now, this would not be a personal collection, as I'm stating again. This would be information that we've seen, themes, word phrases, interviews, observations, document analysis through our literature review. The keywords are analysis and results, which implies that you have analyzed the raw data, presenting the results or whatever we've discovered in this chapter. This chapter should be a standalone, meaning that you could ask a friend to read it, and he or she would discover in the study what you have read what you have discovered in the study without having to have read chapters 1 and 3. Chapter 4 should be aligned with the purpose of the study, the research questions, why the study was important, how it connects to the underlying theories, the literature review, and the reflective of the conceptual framework. So chapter 4 is a culmination of your study and represents your best thinking, and how you answered the research question that you had posed, okay? And it's okay if you didn't get an answer. That's something that I think is important, and I'll continue to say that throughout. There's no specific writing style. We're using qualitative data. There may be some quantitative data in your literature review, and that's okay to use that as well. Since we didn't collect any, it's okay that you use the information or the graphs and charts that are in your literature review. And you may choose from an assortment of styles to tell your story and organize it in an interesting manner. Okay, so you've heard the word triangulation, and that's written in the handbook. And the definition of triangulation refers to using multiple methods of data sources and qualitative research to develop a comprehensive understanding of the phenomenon. Triangulation has been also viewed as a qualitative research strategy to test validity through the convergence of information from different sources. So basically, we're just saying that we're going to look at different types of data collection to come to a conclusion about the information and the research, and that makes it more valid. Some examples of data collection strategy and artifacts. These are teacher ones, so they may or may not be applicable to your literature review, but you should find something that falls in these categories. The student-generated, teacher-made tests, standardized tests, written assignments, performances, artwork, projects, journals. You should see a lot of that. teacher-generated, lesson plan, journals, self-assessment, peer reviews, computer-generated reports, student records, documents. You should see all of that as you're reading through your literature, your journals that you collected for your literature review. Observational data like field notes, observational records, logs, narratives, checklists, tally sheets, videotapes, photographs, audio tapes, organizational charts, maps, and behavioral skills, okay? And then inquiry data, interviews, focus groups, conferences, surveys, questionnaires, attitudes, and skills. So again, these are data collection strategies. These are the strategies that you would find in your journals that you read for your literature review, and you're analyzing that information. You're not creating any of these types of things to have given out to answer your research questions to your students for this project. All right, so when we're analyzing the qualitative data, it's a process of making meaning from the data sources that can be interpreted into a number of different ways. So your interpretation is your interpretation, but you're using the information to prove why you feel the way that you feel, or why you've interpreted the information the way that you have. Qualitative data sources, which include text, include field notes, logs, interviews, focus groups, conferences, document journals, open-ended items from surveys, scales, self-assessments, and they can be explained and used to answer research questions only after they've been interpreted. So you're going to look at the information and the data that was collected throughout your journals that you're using for your literature review, and you're going to interpret the findings that these multiple authors have, and find some commonalities into that, and see if that will assist you in answering your research question. So you're looking for themes in the data. Okay, some examples of analysis like setting. It provides a descriptive information on aspects of the research setting. The participant's perspective, which describes what participants think about a certain issue. So you can include these thought processes into your analysis. Definition of the situation illustrates the participant's understanding of the setting and the context. Ways of thinking describes the participant's understanding of self and others. Process explanation, patterns of behavior over time. It's activities that illustrates reoccurring typical behaviors. Events describe specific or particular non-reoccurring meaningful events. Strategies describe methods used by participants to accomplish a certain task. Relationship defines social roles and typical behavior patterns among or between people. And you may find many of these categories in your own data, but there might be other categories that are not listed that also may be relevant. So when you're writing chapter 4, you're going to have the introduction where you're briefly restating the problem statement, the purpose of the study, and the research questions. You're going to tell the reader on the purpose of chapter 4 and how you would organize the story. And then you're going to briefly describe the research design, whether you use the ethnographic method, case study method, or so on. So, and that just, you're talking about all the different information that you collected within and interpreted and analyzed within your literature review. You're going to briefly tell about the sample you studied and the data collection techniques. So you're going to look at your group and how it applies and how you interpreted the information from the literature review and your journal. And then you're going to explain how the data were processed, You didn't have any codings. You're just kind of looking at themes and you're just talking about those themes. And then you're going to explain how you establish the trustworthiness of the data that you collected. So a little couple of lines on the trustworthiness and the validity. The body should not have subheadings, but rather it should be the main part of Chapter 4. And it is suggested that you begin with the demographics of your study, the informants, the participants, explaining the age, gender, relevant information about the sample. And you could also present this in the form of tables. So you could add a table into that. You could begin telling your findings, which you can organize according to the research question, or you may approach the chapter according to the significant themes or categories that have emerged from the analysis of the data. There's no single way to present the findings because it depends on your research design. And you can use verbatim quotes, you know, and from that you collected from the journal in your literature review. So this is an example of presenting the data. The example is that children's ability to discriminate among food types. And so they started with a verbatim quote. My mother says, drink juice because it's healthy. And she says, if you don't drink it, you won't get healthy and you won't have any sweets and you'll end up having to go to the hospital if you don't eat anything like vegetables because you'll get weak. So here's the explanation of the researcher. The interview demonstrates that children are able to differentiate and discriminate between different types of food effortlessly. Also, their ability to discriminate types of food and drink was both sophisticated and complex, incorporating positive and negative notions relating to food and its health and social consequences. So as you can see, they use a direct quote and then analyze that information coming from, and of course that would be cited, all right? So this is an example of writing Chapter 4. I hope this is helpful. If you have any other additional questions, please let me know, and thank you so much.